The first panel discussion of the second day of the defense track at the Warsaw Security Forum. The topic of the discussion is, in fact, is the missile threat more serious than we expected? Conclusions from the war in Ukraine for integrated air and missile defense. I would like to remind those that are here with us in person that you're invited to ask questions of speakers into the panel. There is a microphone to the side of the stage, so please do approach it with your questions. And now it's time to introduce the moderator of this first panel discussion, Beata Górka-Winter from the University of Warsaw. Let's give her a warm welcome to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Beata Górka. I'm security expert. I was working for Polish Institute of International Affairs for many years as analyst and program coordinator on security. Then I switched to defense business for a while. Now I'm working as adjunct professor at the University of Warsaw. Today I have a pleasure to moderate a panel on integrated air and missile defense, the issue which is, I guess, of crucial importance. And thank you. I have to give thanks for organizers for inviting me to moderate this particular panel. As some of you may know, the problem is very close to my heart, as I was researching on air and missile defense for many years as researcher, as a security expert. So in today's panel, we have four distinguished speakers, and let me introduce them to you. We have Brigadier General Kazimierz Dyński from General Command of the Polish Armed Forces. Good morning, General. We have Lieutenant General Andrzej Fałkowski, Deputy Chief of General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces in between 2013 and 14. Good morning. We have also two civilian experts, Reuben Johnson, Defense Technology and Political Military Affairs Correspondent based in Kyiv, and last but not least, Marcin Piotrowski, Analyst from Polish Institute of International Affairs. Okay, so with this panel, we have to be as quick as Ukrainian counteroffensive, as we only have 15 minutes to cover such a broad issue. So I would like to ask our panelists to be brief and concrete. We have many questions, and I'm sure that there would be some questions also from the audience. So let me first start with civilians, as I would like to ask Reuben, as you are based in Kyiv, about Ukrainian experience. So basing on your experience, could you describe Ukrainian efforts in this particular domain? Before the war, Ukrainian land forces were trained by NATO countries, which allowed them to be extremely effective in countering Russian land offensive. Well, but in the air and missile domain, this cooperation was not so tight, as I understand. There were several approaches of Western businesses and Western governments to cooperate with Ukraine on air and missile defense programs, but the systems in Ukraine possessions were mainly of Soviet origin. So can we speculate that if the cooperation of Ukraine with Western providers on the anti-missile issues was more advanced, we wouldn't face a so heavy demolition of the Ukrainian civilian and military targets. What's your take on that?
Well, okay, I had the chance to spend quite a bit of time with the Ukrainian Air Defense Forces last month. Almost all the equipment they have now is what was inherited, left over from the Soviet period and other pieces of equipment, but it's all of Russian origin, and most of it is at least one step back from the state of the art of what the Russian forces operate. I will say that there are two great groups of unsung heroes in this war. One would be the truckers, which are bringing all of this military hardware across the border from Poland into Ukraine. But the second group would be the air defense forces, because they're achieving what I regard as miraculous results with a modest set of equipment. And not only is the equipment older, but there is no nationwide radar network that allows them to be able to track incoming missiles in advance. I mean, I was told that many times the targets are not identified until they're visually seen. I mean, until they're seen visually. There's not on a radar scope. Once people see them, they can be targeted by fire control radar. But it's remarkable that that the Russians will fire, let's say, 11 cruise missiles, and the Ukrainian air defense manages to shoot down 9 of them. So only 2 of them get through, but the ones that are getting through are causing huge destruction because these are older missiles. They're mostly KH-22, NATO codename AS-4 Kitchen. They were designed and first entered service in the early 1960s. They're very old. They have a non-discriminating seeker. They were designed to kill aircraft carriers, so they simply seek out the largest target that there is. There's no aircraft carriers moving up and down the rivers in Ukraine, so this is why you see so many missile hits on shopping malls, on rail stations, on hospitals, and so on. As far as Western cooperation, Ukraine is going to be receiving the NASAM system, which is a short-range air defense. They need medium range. They need something in the class of the Patriot desperately. I mean, there's a lot of things. The Ukrainians need everything now. And a lot of capabilities being poured into the country, and EU and the US and other countries deserve all the credit they can get for providing equipment to Ukraine. But the real fact is that while all this stuff is coming in and people are training up to use it, the air defense forces have to shoot down things every single day. And they are doing a magnificent job, but they can't get everything with the type of equipment they have. Sorry if that's a long answer, but...
No, thank you. Just additional question, if I may. We hear a lot about the future systems which may be deployed to Ukraine, and possibly they would come from different countries. Yes, there's this German discussion. We had US, we had Slovakia. So, in your opinion, would it be easy to integrate all of them? I'm asking this question because in Poland, for years, we had this discussion actually not only about the particular system, but the whole architecture. You mentioned sensors. And missile defense is not only about missiles, yes, actually, but also it's a whole system. So what is your take on that? How Ukraine can manage to integrate, so many systems at once?
Well, the short answer is there's been some very low level of integration already. For example, putting some old German anti-aircraft artillery together with Russian-make air defense missile systems and combining the two. But if you're talking about integration in a larger sense of being able to integrate all the sensors, it's going to take a wholesale replacement. Patriot, for example, which is the best, most well-known and the most widely used medium-range air defense system in the world, it's not something that just plugs in to somebody else's network. And so it'll require a wholesale replacement, and of course all that stuff has to be built. if some countries are willing to donate systems to the Ukrainians and train the crews, that's one thing. But for Ukraine to receive brand new equipment, it's going to take as long as it takes to build them, and that's most likely years.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Now I would like to switch to Marcin because I would like to continue on Ukraine and Ukrainian experiences during this war. So Marcin, you are following very closely the development of Russian air and missile potential for more than a decade, if I remember correctly. Could you shed some light on the issue, how it was assessed before the war, what changed after the 8 months of military activities? Were military analysts even close to accurate view on how this potential looks like? And if not, the next question, of course, is why we were so wrong. So what's your take on that?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. So maybe I will simplify a lot of issues or very complicated and technical issues. So firstly, I would say that we take, or majority of analysts took a rather wrong threat assessment of the Russian capabilities. Because we, as analysts, we used mainly on the open sources also looking at especially comparing Syria experience of Russian missile arsenal or also air forces. We tried to compare this with the NATO standards and operational concepts. And we look also, I have a huge pile of the different reports and Russian publications about the so-called reconnaissance strike complex. And of course that was very misleading if we look at how Russian managed this campaign. And so, for instance, we expected that there will be well-prepared, well-coordinated missile and air strikes, good targeting, good reconnaissance, and of course, joint operations between the Russian ground and air forces. Instead of this, what we have seen, especially after first 2 weeks of war, we have seen the lack of any good intelligence and reconnaissance on the Russian side, lack of precise targeting, lack of saturation of this Ukrainian air and missile defense system. And we haven't seen this, what is called in the NATO jargon, suppression and destruction of air defense, said that. So, and of course, I mentioned this joint, so we haven't seen any jointness, especially in the Kyiv campaign operation. So I would say that for me, leaving this doctrine or tactics of Russians, for me the most shocking is the low quality of the Russian missile arsenal. Because even if Iskander or Kalibr is a, let's say, technically good construction, it's a good model. So it seems that the Russians don't know what is quality control of what they produce in the last decade. So there are estimates, I don't know how accurate are these. There are estimates that maybe 40 or half of the 40% or maybe even half of the Russian missiles are missing the targets. And I would stress also that still the potential or asymmetry between the belligerents. So as far as what I have seen is probably over 3,500 missiles which were attacking striking Ukraine so far. And it's interesting if you look at this official data that on the first day they used over 160 missiles. But as far as I can count, in the next days, there were really a few days when they used maybe around 100 missiles. That's maybe 6 or 8 days. since that. So I see General is agreeing, so I'm happy that from open sources it's accurate. And we see that on average, maybe Russians are using the 10 to maybe 15 missiles per day. So, and we see also the quality trend is, I mean that what Reuben said, that Russians are, seems that the stocks of the last decade produced missiles are finite. So it seems that they are more frequently using these older missiles like H-22 Kitchen or Tochka. And we even see, which is of course without military sense, use of the interceptors for S-300 system to attack the civilian soft targets. So it's the point is that of course they cannot with these missiles, with these interceptors, make too much harm to the Ukrainian armed forces. But of course, and that's I'm afraid that still in the next few months we will see a lot of suffering and a lot of killed civilians, even with these systems which are not dedicated to the targeting the ground targets. And still, even if we focus, I understood, on the missiles, but for me also I would say I don't expect any miracles with the Russian air forces. That's a good news because they show that they are incompetent. You cannot compare, clearly you cannot compare Russian air forces, air pilots training with the NATO standards, with the NATO training and demands or concepts. So that's a good news. But the bad news is that they still have maybe over 600, maybe 700 quite modern multi-role jets, and I expect that in the next few weeks and months they will use that. So maybe I will stop on this.
If I may, just additional quick thing. We've heard a lot about Iranian support to Russia in terms of supplying their systems. If you look at characteristics, you know it's very well designed on the paper, but how would you assess? Would it make any difference to what Russia has now in possession? And it's like with this Russian story that we have one thing in documents, in open sources, when they praise a lot their capabilities and they showed us over many years how good they are and how advanced they are. Is the same story with Iranians? We would be worrying about that?
Yeah, we should worry, but I don't want to go to some parallels between the Russians and between the Russian and Iranian propaganda. So take it with a grain of salt. It's both the Russian systems and Iranian systems are by our standards, are very primitive, and you can take down with the electronic warfare, with the even very short range air defense systems. So I don't think that they will make a huge difference on the battlefield. It's again, it shows a lot about the Russian industrial capabilities or lack of it. So because what we have seen even on the first days, they try to use their drones, but the losses are, as far as I remember, among the 100 or 140 drones, Russian drones, shot down. So 80 something is Orlan 10. It's a drone for the Russian artillery, to support Russian artillery, and it's a very primitive. We have seen this, with the Canon camera and some bottle instead of fuel back. So I don't expect that. Maybe Iranians, they used or send this to the different proxy forces in the Middle East, and they are quite effective, might be effective in asymmetric warfare. But I don't think that they will make any difference on the battlefield on what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you. That's definitely a good news. Well, now I would like to turn into Poland and a word about lessons learned from what we are observing during this Ukrainian military campaign. And my question to General Dyński, I'm sure that you are observing very closely the developments on the Ukrainian front. So the question is quite simple, I guess. What are the lessons learned for Polish air and defense system? We have multiple announcements that we are buying a lot of land equipment. We are procuring a lot of land systems. How would you describe Polish effort in designing Polish air and missile defense architecture, considering what we already know from Ukraine, because the situation changed? So what are new assessments and new efforts?
Good morning. Thank you for the question. So today is 224 days of war in Ukraine. A war which was triggered by Putin, war which is with full brutality and full spectrum of kinetic usage of the power. As Russia is conducting war, breaking his law, international law, with conventional law, and with all those brutal power. As we are observing very closely and very deliberately what is the conduct of the war, and as we have heard a couple of minutes ago, that as Russia is unsuccessful on this, to get the center of gravity and what was initially described as the end state. As Russian forces didn't get the air superiority, so was some observation that Russia air power is able to gain and to maintain air superiority over the Ukraine is never get. So with the common perception, we have overestimated the capability of the Russia, as how good they are, how advanced they are, and which is not the true. So all those data which we have heard a couple of minutes ago, with the number of the air strikes, missile strikes, so with the numbers and the decreased number of those capability, those are lessons and observations from our side. So with the nature of the war, with the fire, maneuver, and logistics. I am highlighting the importance of the logistic capabilities of the Russia, which is weaker than we thought previously, prior to the war. As the ammunition availability, the missiles availability, and the precision strike, which we thought that they are much more capable. So all those observations are placed to our lessons learned, lessons observed, identified system. The number of US unmanned systems which were used, how precise they are, and how they could contribute to the combat airfield. So all those in together, driving us to the point that the direction in which Polish armed forces are developing, the modernization process is on the good way. I would like to elaborate a little bit more about and focus on air defense, full spectrum air defense or multi-layered air defense. We all recognized how important is air defense and what are the losses if there is not as available air defense system on the field and as air defense system which are dedicated to protect vital infrastructure of the country. So in this respect, I would like to share with you the concept and idea how the observations and lessons from the war are implemented in the Polish Ministry of National Defense plans and the concept to build air defense. We are in this very advanced process of the reconfiguration, the old mannered air defense system in Poland, with building and fielding to the forces new technology, new air defense capabilities, starting from the short air defense with Pilica program. Yesterday we witnessed the signature of the agreement between Polish and UK government to procure common and CAM system to support Pilica program, which is short air defense. Narew also short air defense program. And on the top of those three multi-layered air defense system is procurement of the Patriot system. 3 layers of air defense, 2 short and 1 medium range. The most important is the fielding and procurement of the IBCS, so the command and control system, as we have heard from Norton Grumman's presentation. This is the system. This is the heart and brain of air defense, how to properly detect and to share the information with all capabilities which we are placing in the Polish armed forces. IBCS, which will allow us to engage any air threat from the sensor to the best effector. So all what is connected with the procurement of F-35, the 5th generation of the aircraft, the capabilities to share the data from the F-35 to the air defenders, to share data which allow to fire and to engage the target. This is the point. This is the crucial task which will be possessed in the Polish air defense. I'm one of the luckiest men in Poland that is witnessing the fielding of Patriot and IBCS system. This is the point, and system integration and checkout process started, and by the end of this year, the first battery of Poland, supported by IBCS, will be in place. So this is what are the lessons. As the procurement of first battery, small Narew, we are calling the small Narew system, small Narew, which means that there is a Polish radar, SOA, supported by Zenit C2 system, and with the effector of CAM, is already in the possession of the 18 Air Defense Regiment in Zamość. And first battery yesterday was transferred to the soldiers. As the tempo of the procurement, which was initiated in April, was accomplished yesterday, and the system is in the soldiers' hand on the eastern part of Poland. The second battery will be placed in Elbląg beginning of January next year. So those are the observations. Those are the lessons from the war, which are immediately turned to the reality. This is the power. So I'm really on the good situation to compare to my colleagues, which they planned, they calculated cost. Right now, this system is in the hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is definitely good news. And well, on the one hand, we should be sorry that only the war in Ukraine really was a really clear signal for all of us that we cannot postpone procurement of any military system, be it air or missile defense or land system, that we really have no time. That's my major take from all of these developments, and we are getting really serious about our defense. So thank you, General, for all this information and clarification about how we are dealing with the threat, which may be not as high as Marcin said before, and maybe it is indeed overestimated, but still we shouldn't neglect the risk in the future. Okay, so last but not least, my last question from my side goes to General Fałkowski. I would like to ask you about future perspective. We have 2 new members in NATO, which will be integrating this system into the NATO system. But in a foreseeable future, do you see any chance for Ukraine to be somehow integrated into NATO and air and missile architecture? Of course, when the war ends, the dust will settle. Maybe we should already start talking about this. As we see, Ukraine, even without NATO membership, is very well trained by NATO forces on many levels, also in this domain. So maybe we should sit and think about the whole eastern flank of NATO, adding Ukraine to that picture.
Thank you very much for invitation, first of all, to organizers, for dragging me off my retirement misery yet again. When I was dreaming about the retirement after 40 plus years of service, I was dreaming about slippers and that I would improve my competency to become the operator of the TV remote control. But from the day one of my retirement, I became the member of Defense Reform Advisory Board for Ukraine. This board is very exclusive club consisting of 6 representatives at 3-star level, which is US, UK, Canada, Germany, Lithuania, and Poland. And for 4 years now, we are more than 4 years, we are advising to the ministers of defense. During my term, there were 4 ministers of defense in Ukraine, and to commander-in-chief, 3 of them. So it shows a little bit about continuity in the Ukrainian system. As a DRAP, Defense Reform Advisory Board, we are updated about the situation, and I have to say that even COVID and the war didn't cease our activity, so we are still on VTC, trying to help our Ukrainian friends and partners to improve their system, their defense. Now, a couple of figures at the beginning. The total Russian loss, if we are talking from the beginning of the war, if we are talking about the air domain, our aircrafts, 265. The helicopters, 228. UAVs of operational and tactical level, more than 1,000, 1,026. And cruise missiles, 246. That was from yesterday. And this is only the fraction of the launches of the enemy sorties, and we can only imagine what would happen if the Ukrainian air defense didn't react. Of course, there are some losses on the Ukrainian side, but they are not publishing this, not to show the enemy what the effect might have been. War and lessons learned mentioned here in Ukraine clearly show the need for integrated air and missile defense. It is here like preaching to the preachers a little bit, because we heard all the industrial presentations, I heard my colleagues, but the integrated air and missile defense is providing the deterrence. This is very important factor. And defense of the population, armed forces, and the territory. Important keyword here is integrated. Poland clearly recognized that need. Couple of years ago, or many years ago, but the materialization of the ideas takes a little bit longer, as we all know, and decided on integrated air and missile defense covering medium and short-range capabilities. The first elements of these IMDs would be fielded in 2023. The same direction was taken by Sweden, which is becoming the NATO member soon, I hope, and Romania. They are also going to more or less the same system. However, what is different here, that Poland also decided for IBCS, mentioned here as well several times, integrated battle command system. And as it was said by Kazimierz, those missiles, those airplanes are blind and deaf without the brain, and that brain is provided actually by IBCS. Normally politicians love to make pictures with the well-shaped fighters in the backgrounds, or handsome tanks, or even slim missiles. But nobody talks about something which is actually invisible for anybody. This is something like connecting issues of all the dots, all the sensors, and this is the utmost importance to have such a threat. So the system is able to sense or to identify, to detect and to engage, if necessary, variety of different threats. Aircraft, cruise missiles, theater ballistic missiles, UAVs, and can even fight the electronic warfare. Now, talking about integration of Ukraine, I would not preclude the Ukrainian NATO membership yet. I know that would be very much political decision, but though these are extraordinary times, and the extraordinary solutions are necessary. But as we all know, Ukraine has made a lot of progress. Ukraine is now enhanced opportunity partner for NATO. Only 6 countries are in that club, which is Georgia, Jordan, Australia, Sweden, Finland, and Ukraine. And they have the access to some interoperability issues, to some programs, to the exercises, to be integrated, to be interoperable, to be able to act together whenever necessary. Now, we have in NATO integrated air and missile defense system, which is called NATINAMS, which is the network of the interconnected national and NATO systems comprised of sensor, command control systems, and weapon system. Each country NATO country has different weaponry in its possession. And the trick here is how to integrate all of it together, that the commander, Secure, who is in charge of these NATINAMs, can see what our sensors and radars can see on the so-called Eastern Front or Eastern Front. So let us see what will happen. We have still the special committee, policy committee for the IMD-DC, and I suppose that some partner countries like Ukraine would have privileged position in going through. And we have still Article 10 of the North Atlantic Treaty, which says about the open door policy of NATO. So I'm hoping that sooner rather than later, we will have strong ally on the Polish eastern border. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, we have Article 10, and whom, if not Ukraine, yes, after how much courage and military capabilities they shown during this military campaign. Okay, thank you very much, General, for this coverage. And we have roughly 6 minutes. So, of course, I have still a lot of questions from my side, but it wouldn't be nice to consume all of time for me. So I would like to ask the audience if there are any questions for our panelists, and if so, please raise your hands and present yourself and ask a question briefly. Yes, I see somebody. Please, yeah. Sir.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to ask about the launching of the Kinzhal hypersonic missile a few months ago, and whether that's a significant threat.
I can speak to that.
Sure.
Kinzhal is essentially an air-launched Iskander. It's dropped from a specially modified MiG-31, which has its internal systems completely changed, so it can no longer perform the standard air defense mission. Okay, yes, it's a significant threat, but the biggest problem the Russians have right now, they have the same problem with Kinzhal that they have with the Kaliber, that they have with Iskander, which is that they have been cut off from purchasing and importing a very, very large number of electronic components, and their industry has become almost entirely dependent on importing these foreign components. And this is a huge problem for them, which is why you see less cruise missiles being fired, and the ones you see being fired are very, very old. So the one thing I can say is the most important thing, other than sending lots of weaponry to Ukraine, is to maintain the sanctions that are in place and to add to them wherever possible.
Okay, thank you. General?
And to support us, a couple of words concerning the hyper wars. John Allen has wrote the book as Hyper Wars, and we are witnessing the situation that as the time for decision makers to make decision is almost close to the nanoseconds. So as we are willing to implement the artificial intelligence to support the decision-making process and the interaction from the detection of the threat and with calculation when to target the missile, do not harm the own society, do not harm the infrastructure, critical infrastructure. So yes, this is the challenge. Starting from the Wright brothers' first flight, there is always competition between the air power and air defense, and we are witnessing another point in this term. IBCS is one of the solution of this.
Marcin, we would like to add
yes,
something.
I may add something about the hypersonics. So it's essentially, you must remember that Russians are using the conventional version of Kinzhal in Ukraine, which my understanding is that the missile is foreseen for the nuclear strikes. And so I wouldn't draw too much conclusions from using the Kinjal. I think it was used mainly for the psychological effect, more on the as a deterrent for the NATO, signaling to the NATO. So as I said, and I hope we will hear from our colleagues from nuclear panel, but I'm much more afraid about the nuclear version of this, which may be a threat for the NATO countries.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? I can't believe you don't have questions about missile defense. Is it all clear? Is there... Please.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jakub Graca.
For over 130
I'm an analyst of the
years.
Institute of New Europe in Warsaw. I have a question to Mr. Piotrowski from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. What do you mean of the last statement of Senator Marco Rubio, who said that what he's most afraid of is not a nuclear attack against Ukraine or NATO by Russia, conducted by Russia, but a potential attack against supply chains, supply channels of weaponry within Ukraine or even in Poland. We all know that there are American troops in Rzeszów as well as Patriot batteries. So it seems surrealistic, a little bit surrealistic. But do you think there is even a chance of a possibility, a real possibility, and of such an attack? Senator Rubio is a high-profile senator, so that cannot be ignored, in my opinion.
Thank you for this easy question. So I would say that
At the end, 1 minute.
essentially we are seeing the slow motion kind of Cuban crisis or the second nuclear crisis. So of course that's for me quite risky. And as I said, there is a nuclear panel in this conference. But I think that we will see in the next, I don't know, weeks or months, we will see a spiral of slow motion but escalation of the threats and signaling from the Russians. Still, I think that somebody and so-called Russian Windows 2022 may help somebody to change the key decision maker in the Kremlin. So that's maybe too optimistic. I wouldn't. I think that Senator Rubio has access to some U.S. intelligence estimates. But still, I think that looking from the historical experience, also the Afghanistan war, Soviets never struck Pakistan during the intervention, and when it was clear that Peshawar and other Pakistani cities were key hubs for the Mujahideen. Of course, that was asymmetrical conflict, and it's a very different situation here. So I would say that still I think it's that firstly the Americans have good access intelligence on what's going on within the Kremlin. So my understanding is that they send the clear signals about some of the consequences, but not all, what may happen with the strikes. So I would personally, I don't want to scare you, but personally, I would expect firstly the conventional strikes from the Russian side on the Romania or Poland, not the nuclear strikes. I think that they will still, even with Putin, with his obsession, personal stakes here, I think that it will be slow motion crisis which will evolve in the next few weeks or maybe even months.
Thank you, Marcin, for relieving a bit of our stress. Okay, the time is that we ran out of time, so we need to finish this panel. First of all, I would like to thank all panelists for their brilliant interventions, and I would like to underline that in this dramatic circumstances, anyway, we end with a positive note. with what our civilian experts explain about overestimation of Russian capabilities, and also from our military guests about building deterrence and resilience, which is still the most important thing on us on the eastern flank. So once again, thank you and see you in a year, I hope.